Welcome to the Always Rising podcast, a show where we talk about Christian values, entrepreneurship, faith-driven lifestyle, love, life, family, and all of the above. Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoy the show. Good morning, Greg Goad, my buddy, my neighbor, my fellow walking in life and walking in Christ brother, man. So happy to have you on. Welcome to the Always Rising podcast.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah.
I am super stoked to be here, and I know we finally got it to where it was going to happen.
Shoo, that's my fault. That's my fault. So.
Yeah, and yeah, there it is.
Yeah, man. So we've known each other now almost 4 years. It's been almost 4 years, which is crazy. That went by real quick. You are a real estate mogul. No, I mean, in all seriousness, you're in the real estate business. You're an entrepreneur. You are, like I said, a brother of mine in Christ. Yeah. You brought me into Woodstock City Church, brought me into the fold. We know so many of the same people everywhere we go. And so our kids are really great friends. You're literally my right next door neighbor. So I'm so happy to have you on today, man.
Dude, I'm excited. It's been a blessing to have amazing neighbors that you can grow with, you know, and it's like our wives are bros, our kids love hanging out together, like our dogs bark at each other. It's fantastic. And it's like there's no worry, like our kids will just go over to your house and play, and like you'll call me like, hey, they're eating dinner. I'm like, all right, cool, and like vice versa, you know. Sure. And it's like I'm so blessed that we have a neighbor that we can just do that with. Yeah. You know, our neighborhood's awesome. Yeah,
we rent our house right now, but AJ, the other day we were talking about buying a house, and AJ goes, "Can we buy another house in the neighborhood?" I was like, "Can we buy this house?" I was like, "You really like the neighborhood?" He's like, "I just want to live next door to Lily," and I'm like, "Yeah, I get it.
That's funny.
I get it." So don't worry, like no matter where we live, you can still hang.
Sure,
it's all good, bro.
Right.
So, man, tell us about you, right? So this podcast, as you know, it's an entrepreneurial Christian lifestyle podcast. You have so much to offer in so many ways from that conversation when it comes to Christ, when it comes to entrepreneurship, man.
Sure.
Please tell our guests all about you.
It's tough because my story is a story. It is a journey and an adventure, and we go through the depths of our society. You know, early on in life, I got involved with drugs and alcohol, and they called me DUI 5000, and
what a nickname!
Oh
man.
My gosh, so trashy. And I'm so grateful for that, though, because what it did was I finally got to the point where I surrendered to my alcoholism, and I cried out to God, and that was the beginning of my journey back to walking with Christ. Was, hey, I'd known Christ growing up, grew up in the church, grew up Methodist, going to MYF on Sunday nights, going on church trips, but I was always the kid that brought like booze on church trips. I hope my mom doesn't listen to this. She might not. I don't know. When I got sober, I was living in Atlanta. I'm from Augusta, and I was working restaurants, and it was great. I went to a lot of 12-step recovery meetings. I had a great 12-step recovery network. I had a great church network that I was involved in. Then I met my wife Lauren, and we ended up traveling and going around out west, and we ended up getting married out west in Big Sky, Montana, specifically in 2015. And shortly after, she said she was homesick. She's from Kennesaw, born and raised, and we moved back. And that was my introduction to real estate. I was at a men's retreat called Rock Eagle. That was this 12-step recovery thing that went on like twice a year, and I'd been going to it for years. This 2007 is when I got sober, so we just celebrated 17 years of sobriety, which is crazy to me. That I guess I'm a 17-year-old now. I kind of feel like that sometimes. Yeah, especially with the cast.
You can talk about how you did that later.
Yeah, but so when I moved back, my friend I met at this, and I hadn't seen him for a couple years because I was living in Montana. And I was coming out of the Friday night speaker meeting of this event, And it's all 12-step recovery, and people come from all over, and it's a full weekend, and it's meetings around the clock, and then there's like big speaker meetings in the auditorium at Rock Eagle. And Rock Eagle is a 4-H camp. It's actually owned by the University of Georgia now. It's in Madison. Cool. Awesome campus, super cool. I look forward to it every year. It's like bonfire, sitting around, hanging out with your buddies and telling stories and helping other guys like seek recovery and then seeking recovery from other guys that have gone further before you. So I run into this friend of mine. His name's John Gale. And I run into John, and we hadn't seen each other in 2 years. And before we had moved to Montana, I had a book study where we would meet at my or his house every Wednesday night. So I knew him extremely well, like watched him get married, watched him have kids, all that stuff. And we pulled over and we had the meetup meeting, and like, you know, we got all the smoke cleared, and it was like, so how are you? And my wife had just broke this news to me that she was like really homesick and wanted to move back. And, you know, for me, I grew up in Augusta, Georgia, and I'd always dreamed of like living in the mountains and living that mountain lifestyle of like being able to ski and mountain bike and be outside. Just everything was like centered around outdoor recreation. Mm-hmm. I was in my element. Lauren, she loved it out there. She knew it was beautiful. She enjoyed it. She had great friends out there, but it was not her scene. Yeah. You know, and she grew up in a Catholic family where her family were all within 10, 15 minutes of each other, you know, brothers and sisters and their kids and, you know, her parents. So they always had that family like century where, you know, our family was kind of a Brady Bunch family, which was amazing too in its own regard, but I just never had that. Yeah. And so when she said she was homesick, I was like kind of carrying that around. We had not made the decision that we were moving back or not. And I'm sitting here talking to John, and I tell him like, hey, Lauren wants to move back. And he just like, boom, so do it. And I was like, wow, bro, like that was not what I was expecting. I was expecting a little like, oh man, you need to fight that. And no, you don't need to do. And he was like, no, you need to move back. He was like, dude, our community needs you back in it, you know, in our church environment, in our recovery environment. Like, dude, we need you. This is a great place to raise a family. Go for it. And I was just kind of like, okay. And that was the first time anybody had ever invited me into like community like that, you know, even though we had been in community before with John, it was that invitation into something. Right. And I just said yes. And after that, he was like, so what are you going to do for work? You're going to move back to Atlanta and do what? And I was like, man, I could do, you know, 100 different things. I've worked in restaurants. I've worked for landscaping companies. I'd done property management. I had done valet work, like parking cars at like high-end places, you know, so I had done a whole litany of jobs. He was like, well, have you ever thought about real estate? And I was like, people said that I would be an okay realtor, but no, not really. He was like, well, as you know, I've been in the business for, 16 years. I recently started my own brokerage. I'll show you everything I know, and I'll pay you a small salary the first year. And I was like, okay. that was it. Yeah. And so when we moved back, I went back and I told Lauren, I was like, hey, I'm on board with moving back, but here's the caveat. You need to find a job first because you're the one with the degree from the University of Georgia, not me. I got the degree from Hard Knocks. Yup. So that's how I got into real estate. We moved back. I started with John. John had this very boutique brokerage called Skyline Realty. It still exists today. He uses it for his investors that he has. So he represents a lot of like hedge fund style investors and flippers and that kind of stuff. Yeah. And he had two specific bigger companies that he was buying and selling for when I came on, and that was how he was able to pay me a salary. I like gophered for him, like go for this, go for that. Yeah. I was that guy and cutting my teeth in real estate. And then, for these hedge funds, I had primarily a list of all the different like buyer boxes that I was looking for, and if they checked all the boxes and the numbers plugged into the spreadsheet and it worked for them, like they're like, okay, offer X amount. And it was always crazy because I would offer X amount and then I would see what they call the proof of funds, the POF. Mm-hmm. And when another agent sees a proof of funds with like $400 million on it, they're just like, is this real? I'm like, yes, this is corporate hedge fund, private money.
Yeah.
But that's what I cut my teeth on the first year is I just did hedge fund deals, and it was fantastic because I learned the system and operations of how a transaction works, right? And through that, during that time, I was just focused on those type of deals. But then what happened was I plugged back into community, and I had never lived in the Northwest Atlanta area. I had always either lived in Roswell or I was inner city, like Midtown, East Atlanta. Like that's where I resided, So like that's where I went to all my 12-step recovery meetings and all that kind of stuff. So like the burbs were never like on the radar for me. Also, I didn't have a driver's license for a very long time, So it's like it was so much easier for me to get around in town because I had a bicycle and a MARTA pass, Whereas like now I actually did have a driver's license and I had bought a vehicle and became an adult, after getting sober. So once I got into the real estate stuff and then doing those like commercial style, even though it was residential homes. What happened was the community that I got plugged into with like the 12-step recovery community, the outdoor recreation community. I'm a big mountain biker. I love to fly fish. I love to hike, do anything outside primarily. And then the other is church organization. We moved back. We got involved at Woodstock City Church. And it was those three communities. What happened was I became someone that people liked, knew, and trusted within my field of real estate. And that's how my business has grown, was through those relationships, which ultimately are rooted in Jesus.
Yeah.
Which is crazy and rad.
Amen. It's amazing. I talked earlier about how many people we know, like in the same circle, right? Like I lead a TLR group, which is the living room through Woodstock City. All of my guys, a lot of them, I should say like probably 60% of them lead in IO. So they know you from that.
Well, I lead some of them.
Yeah, exactly. They know you from your leadership there. So like we get to impact the same folks. I was talking to a guy the other day. It was a client of mine who's a good friend of mine through another friend. And one of his guys on one of the job sites was like, hey, Greg Goad? And I was like, bro, what? He was like, yeah. I was like, how do you know Goad? And he was like, we were at a retreat for recovery together somewhere. And he was like, he's a great guy. I was like, I know, he's my neighbor. He's like, oh, no way. Like, just amazing how, like, and even in the periphery, like, we just know so many of the same people and get to roll with so many of the same people. And so many people walking with Jesus and just, like, trying to live that life.
Dude, it's so hard, and I think, to stay on the path and not get, kicked around by the world, and all the different things that out there can drag you down and blindside you. And, if there's one thing I've learned through like my recovery and my walk with Jesus, it's like, when things get cloudy, you go towards the sunlight.
Amen.
So it's just like finding those people who are the sunlight in your life, and it's like, it's getting on your knees and asking for that help and surrendering to that. And then it's also like knowing who's for you. Jeff Henderson wrote that book he was the pastor at Gwinnett Church for a long time, but I learned a ton from that book, not just about business, but about people, and I've like being for people. So finding the people that are for you, right? The people that are going to be your cheerleaders, they're going to root you on, they're going to high five you and encourage you to do better.
Yeah.
And those are the type of people that I want to be around.
Yeah, for sure. No, listen, like for you, I'm so grateful, especially there's that 4 reference, but like you met me at such a crazy time in my life. My dad had just passed away. We were on we needed to find somewhere to live. We just happened to be looking at a house on a different corner. We came up to turn around and like saw the American Homes for Rent truck in the driveway of our house. We signed the papers on that house, and then like we were moving in and I met you and we grabbed coffee together, and like that's what I'm saying, like you linked me in at Woodstock City, and then my life has grown and changed so much from them. But like my dad had passed away like 4 or 5 months before that. My life was crazy.
It was really raw.
Just started my walk with Jesus, and so yeah, man, I'm so happy and so thankful that God put you in my life right at that time, finding the people for you, man. It was certainly not an accident.
No, it's so amazing and wild, and like that's part of the adventure of life too. It's like seeing these people that like just show up. Yeah, and you're just like, well, it's apparent why they showed up. Yeah, but it's like life's not boring.
No, that segues me into a great question. So I like to ask this question to my guests: is who is the person or maybe a group of people, like that person in your life who you met them and it totally changed the trajectory of your life? If you could think of somebody, or I'm sure there's a handful, but
there most certainly is a handful of people, through 12-step recovery, through growing up in the church. But one guy that really rings out true was somebody that was there early on, that tried to help out and was like a mentor. And his name was Dr. Gary Billingsley. He's a pediatrician out of Augusta, Georgia. And they were lifetime members at Trinity on the Hill United Methodist Church. And his daughter was the same age as me. And I was, the kid that got in trouble. I would come to church, but I was staying in trouble.
Yeah.
But I was still coming around, and he was one of the people that stepped into my life. When my parents split, my dad was 3 states away, and my stepdad respected my situation with my dad, and what happened was Gary kind of stepped into this, like, we called him Dr. B. So Dr. B stepped into this kind of like mentorship role, and like he was always there to like guide me back to the sunlight, kind of like what I was saying earlier. So he most certainly was the one. He was like, you lean into this, and he also showed me like you could like love Jesus and like have fun. So like Dr. B had we had this lake property that the Methodist Church owned on Clarks Hill Lake, which is like South Carolina and Georgia. It's like on both. And we had our church owned this, like, it was like a big camp type thing, and with like campsites, and they had like a little like cabin that was up there that looks like a bunkhouse type thing. But he had 3 jet skis, and he would have all of us guys, and he'd kind of started this little like men's small group, but it was like all us little high school dudes. And he showed us like we could go up and have fun and like pray, and like we could be dudes and like still love Jesus, know? And I think that was like the biggest eye-opening thing for me. It was like I thought that I had this misconception in my mind, and I mean now I know it's just the devil working in the details, but it was just like knowing that I could have a ball of fun and still love Jesus. Like there's Jesus wants us to smile and have joy. And if we find joy in like recreation, different things, like why not do those things?
For leading, I mean, for me, right, like bringing it back, it's amazing to have somebody like that in your life that helps you identify that path. When I lead with TLR, seeing all these different groups of guys and like the way that they live and exactly that, like just trying to make some time to harbor, hey, what do you like to do? Let's find Jesus in that, and leading him down that path. But I mean, for me, and I know you're linked in with these same guys, what the coolest thing is at 20, 19, 21, how straight they have their heads on. They make mistakes just like the rest of us, right? But like, as you very well have explained over the last 10 minutes, and knowing what I was doing at 19, 20 years old, seeing guys who are harboring a relationship with Jesus and building the foundation of their life on that at that age, they're going to be light years ahead of us when they get to our age.
Going all in on Jesus is what they've done,
Absolutely.
I love that. Another person that I would say, so he's a longtime member of Woodstock City Church, but Dale Alexander.
Okay.
And I was in a leadership development group with Dale and Jeremy Bruce, and they were our leaders. And I looked up to Dale and Jeremy because they were entrepreneurs, they were men of faith, they had good marriages, they had children, and like I was like, these dudes got it lit, And so just seeing that too, and I think that's the other misconception that was like, being successful monetarily is like bad or evil, and it just depends how you use it, and it's like we leaned into like, hey, when we get a commission check from selling a home, like 10% goes to the church, and every other deal we'll throw that 10% to a nonprofit, So like Never Alone's one of the ones we love to use, the food pantry just outside of here in Cherokee County. One of the things I learned when I went, I actually did a community series with them on our YouTube channel, Best Life Atlanta, and learning that 1 in 5 kids in Cherokee County school are hungry.
Yeah.
Like devastating. So, I've gotten to learn from people like that to like, hey, let's move that around. It's truly not ours.
Yeah. No, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Some of those statistics are crazy. Like Caitlin, obviously, my wife is in the PTA now, and I'm like hearing what she's bringing back about some of these issues that they're trying to overcome and how they can help the community. Like some of those numbers are insane to think about in your local community. There's just that much.
Like people live like in the same county as us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's tough to stomach, but you go out, you do what you can, and you give your piece back. And I think it's great that you're doing so much and you guys do so much for the community and other people. So you talked about kind of your past. You talked about kind of your walk with Jesus. What do you do every day? What's your advice for young entrepreneurs for finding a good foundation and, as they're stepping into, whether it's young or even somebody who may be young to entrepreneurship, right?
Sure.
They're further along in their career. What's some advice that you have for people to really take that next step and move into it?
Wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I know everybody says it, but it's so true. What I had to learn is I had to schedule time for me and I had to schedule time for God.
Yeah.
Right. And I had to make that the priority. It's waking up, it's the meditation of making my coffee. I make bulletproof coffee most mornings. If you don't know what that is, it's Kerrygold butter with MCT oil blended hot. So it's like a butter latte. So I've been doing that for like 7 years. So that's part of like my meditation process.
I feel like you need to put the disclaimer of the first few times you drink bulletproof coffee, maybe stick around somewhere close to like restroom.
It can most certainly make things move in the downtown regions. That's for sure. You kind of got to work up it's distilled coconut oil is what MCT oil is.
Yeah.
And MCT is medium chain triglycerides. And it was... I learned about this through this crazy diet I did several years ago called Bulletproof. But so I do that, and then I sit down, and it's changed. It's morphed over the years. It's been from reading directly into the Bible, reading like meditative 12-step recovery meditation books. One thing I also do, like no matter what, is I get on my knees and I say that what we call the third step prayer. And it's a surrender prayer primarily, and that's how I start the day. I recently had been listening to Stephen Costardi, another favorite buddy of mine that's in the Woodstock City, and he works for Inside Out. He's our men's director, so he puts all the men's leaders together, and like he's over all the dudes in Inside Out, and I
love him, by the way. I ran into him with Jeremy one time. I didn't know him.
Oh, yeah?
But the first time I met him, he comes walking up. Me and Jeremy were sitting at Bazaar Coffee, and Casardi comes walking up, and he has this, like, pirate white, like, fluffy shirt on. I'm just like, that. Somebody who can walk around like that all day. I love the energy that's coming out of that.
Like, he embodies, like, he is like the Big Lebowski who loves Jesus.
Yeah.
That's the best way I could describe Stephen.
Yeah, I can see it.
And if you go into his office, he's got all the Big Lebowski, like, trinkets and stuff.
I love
which is
it.
Funny, but I think once. So what I was saying, how Stephen came up, he gifted all of us coaches last year and leaders that lead an Inside Out an app called Dwell, and it's a Bible reading app, but it also has this meditation.
Okay.
So it's someone comes on and they pray. There's like some like music, some like chill like Zen music, and then like they'll read some scripture, they'll pray, and then they'll like unpack it, so I like to listen to that now because it's just nice. I don't have to think about anything. I sit down, I'm drinking my coffee, and I press play, and I just sit there, and sometimes we'll go through like breathing meditations too, and it's like, dude, once you start like engaging in breath work and incorporating like Jesus Christ into it, like buckle up and hold on.
Yeah.
It just opens up a whole new arena of life and how you walk and energy. And, I feel like the way you start your day is so, so important. I think one of the other things, you're talking about like success is like at any point in time in the day, you can press the stop button and go somewhere quiet.
Yeah.
And Jesus talks about in Matthew where it's like, hey, go into a closet, shut the door, and pray to your Father, and it's like sometimes you got to do that. Sometimes you got to hit that reset button.
Yes.
You know, and I think another thing for like successful entrepreneurs is like, hey, you're the sum of the top 5 people you hang out with.
Mm-hmm.
You hang out with a bunch of duds, you're going to be a dud. You know, if you hang out with a bunch of rock stars, you're going to be a rock star, you know? So I'm always pushing to find those people who are for one another and who are doing good deeds, you know, doing good deeds in the community, doing good deeds. And, you know, the biggest alert that you can see where someone is like the solid, like, hey, he's the real McCoy, is like, what's their family life like?
Mm-hmm.
What's his relationship with his wife like? What's his relationship with his kids like? Because if that's not right, he's not right. You know, like that's number one.
Yeah. Yeah. No, for sure. There's a couple of things to unpack from what you said there, right? I think the relationship thing, which being my neighbor, that's not fair. You can't judge me on the times I yell at my kids, but
Heard me yell at mine.
But the family life, absolutely, for sure. The people, I mean, my life has changed in such an incredible, amazing way in the last few years with some of the people that I've gotten to spend time with and learn with and just do life with, like amazing people. Yeah. But the entire trajectory of my life has changed. And they have one thing in common, which is they're all walking with Jesus. Like, it's just, I've seen the way that they change other people's lives. I've seen the way that they live their life, and I just really do my best. But also that time for yourself. Yep. You as a person, as a realtor, I know there's a different episode 10, by the way, the next one that's coming out, my buddy Cody Chembars, we recorded it before this one, but he talks all about the difference between realtors and real estate agents. And
it's the whole thing.
Yeah. He educated us on that.
Yeah.
But you're constantly pouring into other people. Mm-hmm. And it's the same with me, right? Like with business, I find myself tired at the end of the day. And I think about like, man, maybe I didn't do all that much today, but it's from the minute I wake up to the minute I lay my head down at night, I'm on the phone with somebody, or I'm emailing somebody, or I'm with the kids or the wife, like constantly pouring out. Yeah. And if you don't take that time to rebuild yourself, you burn out. Yeah, it's tough.
And when you get burned out, that's when the devil comes out.
Amen.
Honestly, like that's when the frustration comes out. You're at your wits' end. It's like, it's nothing Christian about this cat, but Cat Williams. I love comedy, and he did this one bit, and he's like, you got to take care of your star player.
Yeah.
You're the star player,
yes.
You know? So it's like, you got to take care of yourself in that morning time with God, and then your playtime, you know? And it's like, I don't care how old we get as men, like, at the end of the day, all we want to do is play, you know? So you got to figure out what that play looks like for you. For me, it can be mountain biking. It can be, you know, playing disc golf, fly fishing, hiking, trail running, you know, just cruising forestry roads, camping, you know, any of these different things. It could just be simply riding my one wheel, listening to music.
Yeah.
You know, so there's all these different things that I incorporate with play. And I read this book several years ago called Stealing Fire, and this guy named Stephen Kotler wrote it. And he goes and interviews all these CEOs, these super successful like CEOs all across the country. And one thing that stayed true was like they made time to play, you know? So that's one thing that I've incorporated into my life and my lifestyle is like, hey, like no matter where you are, like what does your playtime look like, you know? And I'm not saying go out and play all the time, but like, you know, like you can look at my schedule, like you can look at my Google schedule and see like, hey, there's playtime like scheduled in there.
Yeah.
You know, and I've actually gotten to the point where it's like on Tuesdays between Memorial Day and Labor Day, like I do a community bike ride with like a couple other small business owners. And it's like, that's playtime.
Yeah.
But it's also a time to connect with other men. It's also a ministry time because it's not necessarily a Jesus or religious affiliated thing, but it's another chance to get along other men and be the gospel.
Yeah.
You know, but you can incorporate that into the playtime. It goes back to what Dr. B taught me too. It's like, hey, showing other dudes that you can love Jesus and play at the same time.
Yes.
You know, it's like, get out of here.
Yeah. It's that exact thing, right? Like I've seen that in my life. I've gotten to experience what you're talking about is business relationships or whatever, maybe people that aren't following along with Jesus. When you find yourself in a certain place, they come up to you and they're like, hey man, how did, like, whatever. And you're like, oh man, I owe it all to God.
Yeah.
And then you get to set that seed, right? Plant that seed and get to have those conversations and just watch how that blooms in their life too. And
it's like people hear how much time I've got sober, and it's just a time amount, right? But it's like, I didn't do it. What I did was I surrendered and I invited God into it. And it's been a walk with God the entire time.
Yeah, it's a time thing, but it's also just like a distance from type thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you're just further along on that journey. Yeah. So, you truly are an inspiration for a lot of people. That's really, 17 years is a lifetime.
That's crazy.
A lifetime. Yeah, so I'm super proud of you, man. That's awesome. I appreciate that. And happy for you. So we talked about pouring into other people. We talked about life. What is your inspiration for, like, and I know kind of we talked about that just a moment ago, right? Like you incorporate playtime, you have that ability. Mm-hmm. I'm assuming that part of your inspiration for being an entrepreneur, which was the root of my question here, is like that flexibility and freedom, right? Talk more to, like, as you've built that up, how you learn that was so important, because you talked about it being important, but learning, like, what are some of the struggles that you overcame to get to that point?
Yeah. So, you can, in real estate, as a residential real estate agent or realtor, and I am a realtor, I'm a member of Cherokee Board here locally. You can get caught up in where does your business come from, right? And people's business comes from so many different areas. Like there's so many different ways that you can produce leads to help people buy and sell homes. And what's worked for me is actually finding these relationships organically and building these relationships to the point where I'm the trusted advisor, and it's like, so what I've done was I was at a conference that our brokerage put on several years ago, and it was here in downtown Atlanta, and I went, and this guy named Jordan Terrell, who actually, he used to be a pastor, he runs a team out of Denver, Colorado, and he did this talk on how a 60-person sphere of influence network can lead to 100 transactions a year, and I was like, my ears instantly perked up. I was like, 100 deals a year? I was like, shut the front door. That is a ton of business. It's a lot of money. I was like, 60 people? And I'm like, I could name 100 people right now that I know, So it made me think about, and I'm listening to this talk, and he said, you meet with all 60 people once a quarter, right? And those 60 people, as you build that time together, as you build that trust together, as you grow into that relationship, therefore you will be the trusted person that they'll think of in real estate. Another one of my business folks that I look up to, and he's actually the president of our company at Real Broker, is Sharon Shrivista. And he says this, when someone thinks about you, they shouldn't just think about real estate. They should like, hey, he's a great husband. Yeah. He's a great friend. He's a fun mountain biker, like all these different things, right? But then when they think about real estate, they should think about you, right? But it's knowing how to be that and not be that. I don't want to be the like cheesy like car salesman, right? It's like I don't want to be that person. So what I've done was I incorporated. So I called it Love 60. Instead of doing 60 persons are going to equal 100 transactions a year, I was like, hey, I'm going to write down 60 people on a project management board through a program we use called Asana, and I'm just going to love these 60 people really well. And why go outside your network trying to meet all these new people and try to sell new people all this different stuff when you can just lean into these 60 people and love them well, and they will just be microphones for you. So once I figured that out, and I was like, well, I just want to hang out with my friends anyway. Yeah. And those friends introduce you to other new friends. And, I'm in this mountain bike group. It actually started from our neighborhood called the Psychedelic Wolf Pack. And we've just become this ragtag group of dudes and it's like, hey, it's like, so a lot of those guys that are on there are part of that 60 people. So it's like, you think about all these different, and so they weren't just coffees and lunches. Like originally in his talk, he was talking about just meetings and just getting together. So I was like, well, let's take it a step deeper. Let's figure out how I can incorporate play into these things. So it's like finding the guys that mountain biked, finding the guys that one-wheeled, finding the guys that played disc golf, finding the guys that played golf, all these different things that we can do, hiking, walking, running, any activity other than just a coffee and a lunch, because anybody can blow smoke through a coffee and a lunch. But when you spend time with somebody and you're exercising and you're doing something recreational, like the dopamine, the serotonin, everything that's floating around there, you just connect on such a deeper level. And then you add the Christ part of it in there, and it's just like, like David Cheney is one of those guys. And, I met him through Instagram, and it's like him and I, we found these like to-go communion cups where it's like little like grape juice with a little wafer on top.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
And when him and I ever go ride and we get out in the mountains together, like, dude, we'll pull out and do communion together.
That's awesome.
So it's like, it's not just taking those 60 people, but it's really loving those 60 people well. And what will happen is those 60 people in return will help you be a microphone for your business. And the cool thing is, like, it's not the basis of it. I don't do it for the business, but it was like, hey, how can I still be involved in serving my community and serving the people that I like, know, and trust, but also like still do good business without having to do all these other things? 'Cause I didn't want to cold call. I didn't want to door knock. I didn't want to do all these traditional styles of real estate agents. I didn't want to be on a billboard, as well as like, we both are in the video scene, and it's like I've got 2 YouTube channels. I've got Best Life Atlanta, and then I've got Goad Home Partners, and then we have all our social stuff on Goad Home Partners. So we're utilizing all that video stuff, too. So it's like finding that and being able to utilize that. I think it's not the future. It's here. It's now.
Yeah. Well, so I'm glad you brought up the socials, because that's the next thing I was going to say is you talked about the 60 people.
Right.
And in the marketing space, what I've always told all of my clients is word of mouth is still the best way to grow business.
100%.
And your 60 people, right, is your friends, just your community, but you share on social. That's still word of mouth business. Yeah. You've done a great job. I love all your content. It's a lot of fun. Yeah. Even Cody, I told you the guy in the next episode, he talked about you the other day when he was in here recording. He's like, man, I love watching Greg's stuff. Like, he's doing awesome. But it's still word of mouth. Like, that's still word of mouth. What people don't, I think oftentimes they miss out on is like, oh, you spend a lot of time doing social, whatever. But it's like, no, that's still word of mouth business. Like your circle of, hey, Tom would come into your bakery and walk down the street and tell Susie about it. Now it's Tom's going to share that with his 450 friends on Facebook, and then they're going to share that with their. Yeah. And so that word of mouth circle has just gotten infinitely larger.
Social media is not new, but our approach has to change, because what can happen is, just like anything else, the devil's in the details, right? I can get lost, and the algorithm can send me stuff I don't need to be looking at. I don't need to be engaged in. But you know what? There's ways to get that stuff out of there. You know, unfollow, don't like it. Don't send this stuff to me. Like, those buttons are there. Yeah. You don't have to look at them. Right?
And 50% of people don't even know that they're there.
No, they don't. And so I always try to encourage people to do that. They're like, how do you have time to do all this stuff on social? And, again, it goes back to schedule. It's like I schedule that time. You know? It's like I schedule myself at least 2 hours a day to be engaged in social media, right? Whether it's Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, now X, utilizing X in our business, and then YouTube as well.
The key takeaway from what you said, though, is being engaged, not just scrolling. It's not spending time on social media. It's spending time in social media working.
Make social again.
Yeah,
right.
For sure.
And I stole that from my friend Jesse Peters. He's an agent up in Winnipeg, and Mr. Social Savvy. Look him up if you ever want to get into social. Like, the dude is a genius. I love his videos as well. He's also with us at Real Broker.
Yeah, we'll make sure all the links to everybody and everything, and all the books are in the
for the social media stuff too. It's like, okay, so. I do a lot of videos, and I do short form content, and I do stuff for listings. I do stuff for community base. I do stuff where I'm vulnerable about whatever's going on in my life, and I'm sharing stuff, that kind of thing. And that's another part. It's just being authentic, right? And it's just being authentically you. And I found that through video. I found that. And so when I do have a piece of content that I'm going to post, I actually look at the business analytics. I have a business Instagram account, but I post to it like a personal account, right? I treat it like a personal account. It's a brand account is primarily what it is, right? So I will actually look at, okay, I'm looking at the timeline and I'm seeing, okay, most of my followers are on at this time. So I will post at that time, but when I post, I allow myself 15 minutes to post, right? So I usually have the piece of content downloaded on my phone. I have the script and the copy already written out. And so the algorithm for me is I go in there, I go through all of my alerts, right? All the people that's hearted stuff, left comments. I go through, I address all of those first. I scroll for 5 minutes, leaving hearts on stuff that I truly do like, you know. But then I also leave comments, like genuine comments. If it's somebody that I am like 100% for, I'm writing a genuine comment. I'm commenting on that. I'm trying to get engagement. I'm trying to create conversation in the threads, as they call it, right? So I'll do that for 5 minutes. I'll post the piece of content. Then I go to my DMs, and I will DM. I will go through, and I will just the first person who answers, we'll chit chat for 5 minutes, right? And then we'll move on to, okay, now who do I need to share this piece of content with? Yep. So then I'll go to the arrow button and I'll share that with everybody that I think should look at that content that's in my aura, right? And then I'm out. It's 15 minutes, right? So it's like, okay, I engage with the people that engage with me. I put love out there for other people. And I put a piece of content out there all within 15 minutes. Yeah. But it's planned. Yeah. Right? So it's totally different. And then, you know, AI is a beautiful thing and a scary thing, but we most certainly utilize ChatGPT, and, you know, you can teach it to write like you. It saves me a ton of time. Yeah. And you know what I can do with that time? I can spend more time at home. I can spend more time with my family. I can spend more time with my clients. Yeah. You know, I can spend more time in relationship rather than doing the administrative part. Yeah. You know, so it's like, hey, I can now treat this thing that, you know, for the good, you know, and I can utilize it in the good, you know, because it most certainly is smarter than me administrative wise. Relationship wise, it will never be the same. Yeah. You know, but
no, to listen, I totally understand. As an agency, we do exactly what you're talking about on social for 15 or 20 businesses or individuals at a time, right? So I'm not afraid to share with my clients. We absolutely use ChatGPT. We'd be remiss if we did not. Yeah. And what that does in the aspect of our business as a marketing agency is it allows us to spend more one-on-one time with our clients to understand them and their business, and then be able to speak in their language.
And then you can train it to speak in their language. Exactly. That's the other beautiful thing. You say, hey, write me a script for Greg Goad from Best Life Atlanta for a social post on Instagram using emojis, SEO, and hashtags exactly for Instagram. And bajam, it's there, you know. And then, okay, I'm going to use that same video in this script. And I say, okay, for an X post, for a TikTok post, you know, and so forth and so on. And it's like, well, that would have taken me hours to do. Yeah. But then I just did it in 5 minutes.
Yeah. AI is absolutely something that can be abused. It could be something that could run rampant, but it's, to your point of what you said a moment ago, it's also something that if you utilize it the right way and take it captive, just like anything else in life, you talk about recovery, right? Take it captive and utilize it the right way. Yeah. It can absolutely help your life and create you for those efficiencies for family, for time, all of that. I love what you're saying on that. I think so many people get so scared of AI and
and it is. I 100% think that, you know, I think it needs to be regulated to an extent, but like at some point it's like, okay, well, you got to let it do its thing too.
Well, it's just like anything else. Yeah, regulation, sure, but self-regulation, as you know, is the number one. Like, if you can't let somebody else put regulations in place for you, and you can't decide. Like, somebody needs to stop me from this. Versus,
and that's like freedom of speech too. And that's like one thing I love about our country is like, hey, we can say whatever we want. Yeah. You know?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
you should be able to. Now, again, self-regulation.
Right. Exactly. You know, it's like the freedom to talk about Jesus, the fact that we can post this podcast. Right. And it's like we're openly talking about religion and Jesus and God the Father and incorporating it into business and relationships. And it's like, do you think they could post this in some other countries?
No. And you can't, well, we won't get into it. We won't get into it. Dude, we were 45 minutes in already. so thankful that you came on, and I'm looking forward to having you back again soon. One of the things I ask all of my guests to do as we're wrapping up is to say a prayer and close out the episode, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Dear Heavenly Father, we just praise you and worship you and glorify your name, King Jesus. Lord, I thank you for Andrew and his heart and his family, and I thank you for what he's doing in the podcast realm, and that he is sharing the love of God with others and giving us a microphone so therefore we can show the love to other people and that we can grow into our relationship, Lord. And I pray that this would reach the amount of people that needs to reach and reach the person that needs to reach, that they may look to you. And all these things we ask in your name, Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Bro, thank you so much for coming on today, man. I love you and I love your family and I love having you around. So, so stoked to get this out there and share it with the world. Thank you for joining us on today's episode of the Always Rising podcast. You can find today's episode and all previous full video episodes on YouTube and Facebook. Full audio-only episodes are also available on Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever else you listen to podcasts. Please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, X, and TikTok. Thank you again for your love and support, and we hope to see you again next time.